Welcome, gentle listeners, to another soothing journey through time. Close your eyes and let yourself settle into comfort. Tonight, we're traveling back nearly 2,000 years to a world where relaxation was an art form, where the simple act of bathing became a cornerstone of civilization itself. Picture yourself stepping through time. The modern world fades away like morning mist as we enter the warm, steamy embrace of ancient Rome. Here, in this peaceful moment between day and night, we'll discover the hidden secrets of Roman baths, those magnificent temples of wellness that shaped an empire and perhaps changed the course of human history. Take a slow, deep breath and allow yourself to drift as we begin our gentle exploration of these ancient sanctuaries. Imagine, if you will, the soft light of dawn breaking over the 7 hills of Rome in the year 25 BCE. The city is awakening slowly. Smoke rises from countless hearths. The gentle murmur of voices carries on the morning air. But there's something different about this awakening, something that sets Rome apart from every other civilization that has come before. As the sun climbs higher, casting golden rays through narrow streets, the people are not hurrying to fields or workshops. Instead, they move with a leisurely purpose toward magnificent buildings that rise like marble dreams from the urban landscape. These are the thermae, the great public baths, and they represent something revolutionary, something that would change the very meaning of daily life. If you're finding peace in this journey, feel free to let yourself drift deeper, or perhaps share this gentle moment with someone who needs rest. The story of Roman bathing begins not with grand marble halls, but with simple necessity. Long before Caesar crossed the Rubicon, long before the Colosseum cast its mighty shadow, the early Romans had discovered something profound about the relationship between body, mind, and spirit. It started with the Greeks, those masters of philosophy and art, who had developed sophisticated bathing practices centuries earlier. But the Romans, practical and ambitious as they were, took this concept and transformed it into something entirely new. They didn't simply adopt Greek customs. They reimagined them, expanded them, perfected them into an institution that would define their civilization. Picture the early Roman baths of the 2nd century BCE, modest wooden structures heated by simple braziers. The air would have been thick with steam, carrying the gentle scent of olive oil and herbs. Romans would gather in these humble spaces, not merely to cleanse their bodies, but to engage in something far more significant, the art of otium, leisure pursued as a path to wisdom and well-being. The transformation from these simple beginnings to the grand thermae of imperial Rome is a story of human ingenuity and an evolving understanding of what it means to truly live well. As Rome's power grew, as its armies conquered distant lands, as wealth flowed into the city from the far corners of the known world, the baths evolved too, becoming grander, more sophisticated, more central to Roman life than temples or forums. By the time Augustus became the first emperor, bathing had become more than a daily ritual. It was philosophy made manifest, a physical expression of Roman values, discipline, community, and the pursuit of excellence in all things. Let your mind wander now to the year 80 CE, when the Emperor Titus opened the first of the truly grand imperial baths. Close your eyes and step with me through the massive bronze doors into a world that defied every expectation of what a bath could be. The sound hits you first, not the echo of your footsteps on marble, but something softer, more enveloping. It's the gentle splash of water, the quiet murmur of conversation, the almost musical quality of steam rising from heated pools. The acoustics have been designed by master architects, every curve and angle calculated to create an atmosphere of perfect tranquility. The ceilings soar above you 40, 50, 60 feet high, supported by columns of imported marble that seem to glow with inner light. porphyry from Egypt, its deep purple veined with gold, marble from the quarries of Carrara, white as fresh snow, smooth as silk beneath your fingertips, green marble from Greece, blue-grey stone from Asia Minor, each piece chosen not just for its beauty, but for its ability to retain and radiate gentle warmth. Let yourself sink deeper into this vision. If this brings you peace, perhaps leave a quiet thought about where you'd like to travel next. The Romans understood something profound about space and human psychology. These weren't simply functional buildings. They were carefully orchestrated experiences in relaxation. Every detail had been considered, from the height of the steps, designed to slow your pace and encourage contemplation, to the placement of windows positioned to capture and scatter sunlight into thousands of dancing points of golden warmth. The Hippocos system, that marvel of Roman engineering, was hidden beneath your feet, yet its presence was felt in every breath of warm, humid air. Imagine channels running beneath the marble floors like a vast network of arteries carrying heated air from great furnaces tended by skilled slaves. The floors themselves were raised on small pillars, creating a cavity where warm air could circulate, heating the marble to a temperature that was perfectly comfortable to bare feet, never too hot, never too cold. The walls, too, were part of this heating system. Hollow bricks allowed warm air to rise through the structure, heating the rooms from floor to ceiling with a gentle, even warmth that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. This wasn't the harsh heat of fire, but something more subtle, more nurturing, like being embraced by sunlight itself. As you moved through these spaces, you became part of an architectural symphony. The frigidarium, the cold room, opened before you like a vast atrium, its high ceiling decorated with intricate mosaics that told stories of sea nymphs and water deities. Here, the temperature was cool and refreshing, the marble floors slightly chilled, preparing your body for the journey ahead. From here, you would move to the tepidarium, the warm room, where the temperature rose gradually, your body adjusting slowly, comfortably, to increasing heat. The walls here might be decorated with frescoes of peaceful gardens, olive groves under Mediterranean sun, or distant mountains shrouded in morning mist, everything designed to calm the mind, to prepare the spirit for the ultimate relaxation that awaited in the caldarium, the hot room where steam rose from pools of perfectly heated water like incense offered to the gods of tranquility. Now let us slow down even further and experience what it truly meant to take part in the Roman bathing ritual. Feel yourself settling more deeply into comfort as we explore this ancient dance of purification and renewal. It begins before you even enter the baths. Picture yourself in a Roman villa in the early afternoon, the most popular time for bathing. You've finished your morning duties, business in the forum perhaps, or overseeing work on your estate. The Mediterranean sun is warm but not yet oppressive, perfect for the leisurely journey to the thermae. You gather your bathing supplies with care, for each item has its purpose in the ritual ahead. A strigil, that curved bronze scraper that will remove not just dirt and oil, but the very stress of the day. Bottles of olive oil, some infused with lavender from the hills of Gaul, others with rose petals from Persian gardens, soft linens for drying, and perhaps a scroll of poetry to read in the quiet moments between baths. If you're still with me, breathing slowly, feeling peaceful, you might subscribe to join us on more journeys or simply drift with these ancient rhythms. The entrance fee is modest, just a quadrans, the smallest Roman coin, for even emperors believed that the baths should be accessible to all citizens. This democratic ideal was central to Roman culture, the belief that certain pleasures, certain paths to well-being should transcend social class. As you pass through the entrance, you hand your clothes to an attendant in the apoditerium, the changing room. Here, the walls are lined with niches where your garments will rest safely while you undergo your transformation. The marble benches are worn smooth by countless bodies, each person who sat here part of an unbroken chain of ritual stretching back generations. The first stop is the Districtarium, a room whose very name speaks to preparation. Here, you begin to prepare your body with gentle exercise, not the vigorous athletics of the gymnasium, but slow, mindful movement, designed to warm the muscles and prepare the skin for what's to come. You might stretch, reaching toward the painted ceiling with movements as graceful as a dancer's, or engage in light calisthenics, each motion deliberate, meditative. From here, you move to the unctuarium, where the real preparation begins. Attendants skilled in the ancient arts of massage and skincare help you apply warm olive oil to every inch of your body. This isn't simply a practical necessity. It's the beginning of a transformation. The oil, warmed by the Hippocaust system, soaks into your skin like liquid sunlight, carrying with it the essence of Mediterranean groves, the peace of distant hillsides where olive trees have grown for thousands of years. The oil serves multiple purposes, protecting your skin from the heat to come, helping to draw impurities from your pores, and creating a barrier that will allow the bronze strigil to glide smoothly across your flesh without irritation. But more than this, the application of oil is a moment of mindfulness, of awareness of your physical self as something worthy of care and attention. Now comes the progression through the baths themselves, and here is where the true genius of Roman engineering reveals itself. This isn't simply about getting clean. It's about gradual adaptation, about allowing your body to find its perfect equilibrium with heat and moisture. You begin in the frigidarium, where the cool marble floors shock your warm skin into wakefulness. Here you might dip quickly into a pool of cold water, not a plunge that shocks the system, but a gentle introduction of contrast that awakens every nerve. The cold water serves a purpose beyond mere temperature. It begins the process of opening and closing your pores in rhythm, like the breathing of the skin itself. The tepidarium draws you next, and here you begin to understand the sophistication of Roman wellness philosophy. The temperature is perfect, warm enough to be comforting, not so hot as to cause stress. You settle onto marble benches that radiate gentle warmth, feeling the oil on your skin begin to work its magic, drawing out the impurities of daily life like a poultice, drawing poison from a wound. Here you might spend a long time talking quietly with friends, reading, or simply sitting in contemplative silence. Time moves differently in the tepidarium. Minutes stretch into something approaching eternity, and you begin to understand why Romans would spend entire afternoons in these spaces. Finally, when your body is perfectly prepared, when your skin glows with warmth and oil, you enter the caldarium. The heat here is intense, but not overwhelming. The air thick with steam that carries the faint scent of burning wood from the Hippocaust furnaces far below. Here, in the hottest room of the sequence, you will finally understand the true purpose of the Roman bath. As you settle into the caldarium, let your breathing slow and allow me to share with you secrets that few modern people understand about Roman bathing culture. These weren't simple washhouses. They were sophisticated laboratories of human wellness based on medical and philosophical principles that were centuries ahead of their time. Feel free to let these ancient wisdoms wash over you like warm water on tired skin. And if you find peace here, share it with someone who needs healing rest. The Romans had inherited much from Greek medical tradition, but they added their own practical genius to create something unprecedented. They understood, long before modern science confirmed it, that the skin is the body's largest organ, and that what happens to the skin affects every other system in profound ways. The progression from cold to warm to hot wasn't arbitrary. It was based on careful observation of how the human body responds to temperature changes. The frigidarium caused blood vessels near the skin's surface to contract, concentrating circulation to vital organs. The tepidarium allowed gradual dilation, encouraging blood flow to return to the extremities in a controlled manner. The caldarium completed the process, opening every pore, every capillary, allowing the body to release toxins through perspiration while absorbing beneficial minerals from the carefully prepared waters. But the Romans went further than simple temperature therapy. They understood that different minerals, different additives to the water, could enhance these effects. Bath waters might be infused with sea salt, rich in magnesium and other trace elements that the skin could absorb. Sulphur springs, like those at Aquae Sulis, modern Bath in England, were prized for their supposed healing properties for joint pain and skin conditions. Some baths featured waters enriched with iron, believed to strengthen the blood. Others incorporated aromatic herbs, not merely for fragrance but for their presumed medicinal effects. Lavender for calm, rosemary for mental clarity, pine for respiratory health. These weren't superstitions, they were early attempts at what we might now call aromatherapy, based on careful observation of how different scents affected mood and well-being. The use of the strigil, that curved bronze scraper, reveals another layer of Roman understanding. This wasn't simply about removing dirt and oil. It was a form of massage, of exfoliation that stimulated circulation and removed dead skin cells far more effectively than simple washing with water and soap could achieve. The technique required skill. The strigil had to be applied with just the right pressure, following the natural lines of muscle and bone, working with the body's own systems rather than against them. Skilled attendants, called capsarii, were trained in this art, understanding how to use the tool to promote both cleanliness and health. The scraping motion had to follow specific patterns, long strokes along the limbs to encourage lymphatic drainage, circular motions on the torso to stimulate digestion, gentle pressure on the scalp to promote circulation to the brain. This wasn't random grooming, it was a systematic approach to wellness that engaged the entire body. After the strigil had done its work, warm water would be poured over the skin to rinse away the mixture of oil, sweat, and impurities that had been scraped away. But even this wasn't simply functional. The temperature of the rinse water was carefully controlled, warm enough to be comfortable, cool enough to begin the process of gradually returning the body to its normal temperature. The Romans also understood something that modern science has rediscovered, that the act of bathing in community has psychological benefits that extend far beyond the physical. The social aspect of the thermae wasn't incidental, it was central to their therapeutic value. In these steamy, peaceful spaces, social barriers that existed in the outside world became permeable. Senators might find themselves in quiet conversation with merchants. Philosophers might debate points of doctrine with farmers. Slaves might serve their masters in roles that emphasized care and expertise rather than subservience. This social mixing wasn't accidental. It was part of Roman political philosophy. The emperors who built the great thermae understood that shared experiences of pleasure and relaxation created bonds between citizens that strengthened the empire itself. People who had sweated together, who had shared the vulnerable experience of nakedness and cleansing, were less likely to see each other as enemies, more likely to find common ground in their daily lives. Let your mind drift now to the grandest of all Roman achievements in the art of bathing. The massive imperial thermae that rose like marble mountains from the heart of Rome itself. Picture yourself approaching the baths of Caracalla in the year 216 CE, when they were newly completed and gleaming in the Mediterranean sun. These weren't simply buildings. They were cities within the city, covering more than 25 acres, capable of accommodating 1,600 bathers at once. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine a structure that could house a small town, devoted entirely to the pursuit of relaxation and wellness. As you visualize these magnificent spaces, let yourself settle deeper, breathing slowly. And if this journey brings you peace, perhaps subscribe to travel further back in time with us. The baths of Caracalla represented the pinnacle of Roman engineering and architectural ambition. The walls rose to heights of 110 feet, higher than many modern office buildings, supported by vaults and domes that showcased masonry skills that wouldn't be equaled for more than 1,000 years. But it wasn't just the scale that made these baths extraordinary. It was the attention to every detail of human comfort and pleasure. The floors were mosaics of unprecedented complexity. Underwater scenes featuring dolphins and sea gods, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the steam-hazed air, portraits of athletes and philosophers whose marble eyes seemed to follow visitors as they moved through the spaces. The ceilings were even more spectacular, coffered domes decorated with gold leaf and painted stars that created the illusion of bathing beneath the open sky. Light filtered down through clerestory windows, but it was more than mere illumination. It was architecture as poetry, creating an atmosphere where the sacred and the secular merged into something transcendent. The hypocaust system here was a marvel of engineering that supplied heat to more than 60 rooms. Imagine underground furnaces large enough to drive carriages through, tended by teams of specially trained slaves called focari, firekeepers, who maintained exact temperatures in each space through careful regulation of airflow and fuel consumption. The water supply was equally impressive. The baths required more than 2 million gallons of fresh water daily, delivered by a dedicated branch of Rome's aqueduct system. This water arrived at different temperatures, some cold from mountain springs, some naturally heated from thermal sources, some warmed by passage through underground chambers near the hypocaust fires. But the true genius lay in the variety of experiences these baths offered. Beyond the basic progression from cold to warm to hot, the baths of Caracalla contained spaces for every conceivable form of relaxation and improvement. There were palestra, open courtyards for exercise, where Romans could engage in wrestling, running, or ball games before their baths. These weren't simply gyms, they were designed as extensions of the bathing experience, spaces where physical exertion prepared the body for the relaxation to come. Libraries occupied quiet corners of the complex, rooms lined with scrolls where visitors could read philosophy, poetry, or works on medicine and natural science while they rested between baths. Imagine settling into a warm alcove, your body glowing from the caldarium, to read the latest work of Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, letting their wisdom soak into your relaxed mind like water into parched earth. Gardens filled the spaces between buildings, not mere decorative elements, but carefully planned therapeutic landscapes. Herb gardens provided fresh materials for bath additives. Flower gardens offered aromatherapy through natural fragrances carried on warm breezes. Vegetable gardens supplied ingredients for the simple meals that were served to bathers who spent entire days in the complex. There were rooms for massage, where skilled practitioners, some of them Greek slaves who had trained for years in the art, would work warm oils into tired muscles with techniques that combined therapeutic knowledge with almost mystical understanding of the human body's energy systems. Treatment rooms offered more specialized services, cupping to draw out impurities, the application of hot stones to relieve muscle tension, herbal poultices for skin conditions, even primitive forms of what we might now recognize as physical therapy for those recovering from injuries. Some rooms were dedicated to beauty treatments, hairstyling, nail care, the application of cosmetics made from ingredients gathered throughout the empire. These weren't vanity services. They were part of the Roman understanding that care of the physical self was a form of spiritual discipline, a way of honoring the divine spark that resided in every human body. The acoustics throughout the complex had been designed to promote tranquility. Conversations could be held in normal tones without echoing. Water sounds were amplified just enough to mask unwanted noise from the city beyond. The overall effect was of being insulated from the outside world, wrapped in a cocoon of marble and warm air, where time seemed to slow to the rhythm of gentle breathing. Now let us slow our pace even further and explore the hidden social world that flourished within these steamy sanctuaries. Allow yourself to drift deeper into relaxation as we discover how the Roman baths became the true heart of empire. Not just places of cleansing, but the very foundation of Roman civilization itself. Breathe slowly. Let these ancient stories wash over you like warm water, and if you find peace in this journey, share it with someone who needs rest. The Roman thermae were among the first truly democratic institutions in human history. Here, in these marble halls thick with steam and soft with candlelight, social boundaries that defined the outside world became fluid, permeable, sometimes invisible altogether. Picture yourself in the tepidarium of the Baths of Agrippa in the peaceful hours of mid-afternoon. The marble benches that line the walls hold an extraordinary cross-section of Roman society. Here, a wealthy senator from an ancient patrician family might find himself in quiet conversation with a freedman who has built a fortune in the grain trade. There, a young philosopher from Greece might debate ethics with a retired centurion whose weathered hands speak of decades on distant frontiers. This mixing wasn't accidental. It was central to Roman political philosophy. The emperors who funded these massive construction projects understood something profound about human nature, that shared experiences of vulnerability and pleasure create bonds that transcend traditional hierarchies. In the warm, humid atmosphere of the baths, where all men were equal in their nakedness, where senator and slave alike submitted to the same rituals of cleansing and renewal, a new kind of social order emerged. Not one based on birth or wealth, but on shared humanity, shared needs, shared appreciation for the simple pleasures of warmth and cleanliness and rest. The conversations that took place in these spaces shaped the course of Roman history. Business deals were negotiated between the tepidarium and the caldarium. Marriages were arranged in quiet corners of the frigidarium. Political alliances were forged over shared meals in the complex's restaurants. But it wasn't just the formal business of empire that flourished here. The baths became incubators of Roman culture itself. New philosophical ideas spread from city to city as visitors shared insights they had gained in conversation with fellow bathers. Artistic styles were transmitted as craftsmen discussed techniques while relaxing in the warm pools. Scientific discoveries were debated and refined in the libraries that were attached to most major bath complexes. The institution of the capsarius, the bath attendant, reveals another layer of this social complexity. These men, usually slaves or freedmen, possessed skills that gave them a unique position in Roman society. A skilled capsarius understood not just the techniques of massage and grooming, but the subtle arts of conversation, discretion, and human psychology. The best capsarii developed relationships with their regular clients that lasted for decades. They became confidants, advisors, sometimes even friends. In a society where frank conversation between different social classes was rare in public settings, the intimate atmosphere of the baths allowed for exchanges that would have been impossible elsewhere. These attendants were repositories of practical wisdom about health and wellness. They understood which oils worked best for different skin types, which temperatures were most beneficial for various conditions, how to read the signs of stress or illness in a person's posture and breathing. Their knowledge was passed down through apprenticeship systems that created informal guilds of bath professionals. The female slaves who worked in the women's sections of the baths or in the smaller thermae that were exclusively for women developed their own specialized knowledge. They understood the particular needs of women's bodies, the effects of different treatments on skin and hair, the social dynamics that shaped women's relationships with their own physical selves. Women's bathing culture in Rome was every bit as sophisticated as that of men, but it developed its own unique characteristics. The conversations in the women's sections tended to focus more on family relationships, on the education of children, on the management of households. But they also provided spaces where women could discuss topics that were forbidden in mixed company: their own health and sexuality, their frustrations with the limitations placed on their public lives, their dreams and ambitions for themselves and their daughters. The children who accompanied their mothers to the baths learned lessons that went far beyond simple hygiene. They absorbed understanding about their own bodies, about the importance of self-care, about the social skills necessary to navigate Roman society. Many of their most important educational experiences took place not in formal schools, but in the warm, accepting atmosphere of the Thermae. Even slaves found a unique form of dignity in the bath complexes. While they might serve others in most aspects of their lives, in the baths their knowledge and skills gave them a form of authority. A slave who understood the intricacies of massage, or who could diagnose skin conditions, or who knew the proper proportions for mixing bath oils, was valued and respected in ways that transcended his legal status. The rhythms of Roman daily life were organized around the baths. The morning hours were for business, for the formal activities of forum and basilica, for the serious work of governing an empire. But the afternoon belonged to the Thermae, to the slow, leisurely pursuit of wellness and pleasure and human connection. This wasn't laziness or decadence. It was a conscious choice about how to structure a meaningful life. The Romans understood that human beings need more than work and duty to thrive. They need beauty. They need physical comfort. They need social connection. They need time to think and dream and simply be present in their own bodies. As the steam swirls around you and you sink deeper into this ancient world of warmth and wisdom, let us explore one of the most fascinating aspects of Roman bathing culture: the belief that these waters possessed not just cleansing power, but genuine healing magic. Settle more comfortably now, breathing slowly, as we discover how the Romans transformed simple bathing into a medical practice that combined empirical observation with spiritual faith. If you're finding peace in these ancient stories, you might leave a gentle comment or share this journey with someone who needs healing rest. The Romans inherited from the Greeks a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between physical and spiritual health, but they added their own practical genius to create something unprecedented: a system of healing that treated the whole person, body, mind, and soul, through the medium of heated water and sacred ritual. At Bath, the Roman city of Aquae Sulis, natural hot springs bubbled up from deep in the earth at a constant temperature of 115 degrees Fahrenheit. To the Romans, this wasn't simply a geological phenomenon. It was proof of divine intervention, evidence that the gods themselves had provided healing waters for human suffering. The temple complex built around these springs reveals the extent to which the Romans saw bathing as a sacred act. The centerpiece was a temple to Sulis Minerva, a goddess who combined the Celtic deity Sulis, associated with healing waters, with the Roman Minerva, goddess of wisdom and medicine. This wasn't cultural appropriation, it was syncretism, the Roman genius for finding common ground between different traditions and creating something new and powerful. Pilgrims came to Bath from across the empire, carrying with them curse tablets, small sheets of lead or pewter inscribed with prayers for healing or requests for divine justice. These tablets were thrown into the sacred spring, where archaeologists have recovered thousands of them, providing us with intimate glimpses into the hopes and fears of ordinary Romans. "May the person who has stolen my bronze vessel become as bent as this tablet," reads one. "Goddess Sulis, I give to your divinity and majesty my bathing tunic. Whoever has stolen it, may you not allow him to sleep or have children," reads another. These weren't just expressions of anger, they were acts of faith, beliefs that the healing waters could restore not just physical health but cosmic justice. The medical understanding behind Roman bathing practices was surprisingly sophisticated. Roman physicians like Galen, whose writings would influence European medicine for more than 1,000 years, understood that different types of water at different temperatures could treat different conditions. For arthritis and joint pain, hot sulfur springs like those at Bath were prescribed. The heat would increase circulation to affected areas, while sulfur compounds absorbed through the skin would reduce inflammation. For skin conditions, cooler waters with high mineral content were recommended, the theory being that beneficial minerals could be absorbed while irritating substances were drawn out. Digestive disorders were treated with waters that contained specific mineral combinations. Iron-rich waters were prescribed for what we would now recognize as anemia. Springs with high concentrations of calcium and magnesium were used to treat bone disorders. While the Romans didn't understand the biochemical mechanisms involved, their empirical observations led them to treatments that modern medicine has validated. The psychological aspects of spa therapy were equally well understood. Roman physicians recognized that the warm, peaceful atmosphere of the baths had therapeutic effects that went beyond simple physical treatment. They observed that patients who seemed depressed or anxious often showed improvement after spending time in the social, nurturing environment of the thermae. This led to the development of what we might recognize as the first systematic approach to what would now be called spa therapy, treatment that combined physical interventions with psychological and social support. Patients with chronic conditions were encouraged to spend extended periods at healing springs, not just for the direct effects of the water, but for the overall lifestyle change that such treatment represented. The daily routine at a healing spa was carefully structured to promote recovery. Patients would rise early before the heat of the day and begin with gentle exercise in the palestra. This wasn't vigorous athletics, but slow, mindful movement designed to prepare the body for the treatments to come. Morning baths would be cooler, designed to invigorate without shocking the system. Patients would progress slowly through waters of increasing temperature, allowing their bodies to adjust gradually to the therapeutic heat. Between baths, they would rest in shaded gardens, often reading or engaged in quiet conversation with other patients. Meals at the healing centers were simple but carefully prepared. Fresh fruits and vegetables, light proteins, pure water from sacred springs. The Romans understood that healing required attention to all aspects of lifestyle, not just the direct application of thermal treatment. Afternoon baths were typically the most intensive part of the therapy. Patients would spend extended periods in the hottest waters, allowing the mineral-rich springs to work on their conditions. This wasn't passive soaking, it was active treatment, with patients encouraged to move gently through the water, to massage affected areas, to focus their minds on the healing process. Evenings were reserved for rest and reflection. Patients would gather in common areas to share stories, to discuss their progress, to support each other through the slow process of recovery. Many formed lasting friendships during these therapeutic retreats, bonds that continued long after they returned to their normal lives. The Romans also developed an understanding of what we would now call the placebo effect, though they wouldn't have used that term. They recognized that belief in the healing power of the waters was itself therapeutic, that patients who approached treatment with faith and optimism were more likely to experience improvement than those who were skeptical or negative. This led to elaborate rituals designed to enhance the psychological impact of treatment. Offerings would be made to healing deities before beginning therapy. Sacred symbols would be painted on the bodies of patients. Prayers and incantations would be recited during the most intensive treatments. Modern medicine might dismiss these practices as superstition, but the Romans were observing something real: the powerful connection between mental state and physical healing, the importance of hope and community support in recovery, the therapeutic value of ritual and ceremony in creating a context for healing. Allow yourself to drift even deeper now into the gentle rhythms that governed Roman daily life. Feel your breathing slow, your muscles relax, as we explore how the baths created a tempo of living that prioritized wellness and human connection above mere productivity. Imagine yourself awakening in a Roman villa in the soft light of dawn in the year 150 CE. The house is stirring gently around you, slaves moving quietly through the corridors, preparing for the day ahead. But there's no rush, no sense of urgency. The Romans understood something that our modern world has forgotten, that the pace of daily life should serve human needs, not dominate them. Let these ancient rhythms calm you. Breathe slowly, and if this gentle pace brings you peace, perhaps share it with someone who needs to slow down. The Roman day was divided into 12 hours of daylight, but these hours expanded and contracted with the seasons, longer in summer, shorter in winter, always tied to natural rhythms rather than arbitrary mechanical divisions. This meant that daily schedules were flexible, organic, responsive to the body's needs and the natural world's cycles. Morning hours, the prima through the tertia, were reserved for business. This was when Romans attended to the formal requirements of civic life, when they appeared in court, conducted business in the forum, received clients and petitioners, managed the practical affairs that kept the empire functioning. But even these morning hours were conducted at a pace that seems leisurely by modern standards. Business meetings were social occasions, punctuated by conversation about family and health and philosophy. Legal proceedings included time for elaborate rhetoric and dramatic presentations. Political discussions wandered through history and theory before addressing immediate practical concerns. The transition from business to leisure was marked by the morning meal, usually simple. Bread and honey, perhaps some fruit or cheese, eaten without haste in the garden or atrium of the home. This wasn't just sustenance. It was a pause, a moment to shift mental gears, to prepare for the different tempo of the afternoon. By the 6th hour, midday, the serious business of Roman life was typically concluded. The forum grew quiet. The law courts emptied. The offices of magistrates closed their doors. This wasn't because Romans were lazy or undisciplined. It was because they understood that human beings need more than work to live meaningful lives. The afternoon hours, from sesta through nona, belonged to the body, to health, to the careful cultivation of physical and social well-being. This was when Romans made their way to the thermae, moving through the streets at a pace that allowed for conversation with neighbors, for observation of the life of the city, for the simple pleasure of being present in the world. The approach to the baths was itself part of the therapeutic experience. Romans didn't rush to their relaxation. They allowed the anticipation to build, savoring the transition from the practical world of morning business to the sacred world of afternoon renewal. Once inside the bath complex, time took on a completely different quality. There were no schedules to keep, no appointments to maintain, no external pressures to guide behavior. Romans might spend an hour in preparation, applying oils, engaging in light exercise, socializing with friends, or they might move directly to the baths themselves, following the rhythm of their own needs and desires. The progression through the bathing sequence was similarly flexible. Some Romans preferred to move quickly, from cold to warm to hot, shocking their systems into alertness before settling into deep relaxation. Others took hours to complete the journey, spending long periods at each temperature, allowing their bodies to adjust slowly and completely to each stage of the experience. In the tepidarium, that perfectly warm middle space, Romans would often lose track of time entirely. Conversations that began as casual greetings might develop into deep philosophical discussions. Business relationships might evolve into personal friendships. Ideas that had been percolating in the busy morning hours would finally have space to develop and mature. The caldarium, that hottest space, was where the true magic of Roman bathing occurred. Here, in the intense heat and thick steam, social barriers dissolved completely. Physical discomfort stripped away pretense and artifice, leaving only essential humanity. Here, Romans learned to endure together, to support each other through the intensity of the experience, to find communion in shared vulnerability. The heat couldn't be rushed or conquered. It could only be accepted, breathed through, allowed to do its work of purification and renewal. Romans would sit in contemplative silence or engage in the kind of deep, honest conversation that only emerges when people are stripped of their usual defenses. When they finally emerged from the caldarium, skin flushed and glowing, Romans would often feel as though they had been reborn. The cool air of the tepidarium felt like a blessing. The marble benches like clouds, the gentle sounds of water and conversation like music from another world. The return journey, from hot to warm to cool, was as important as the initial progression. This wasn't simply about returning the body to normal temperature. It was about integrating the experience, allowing the benefits of the thermal treatment to settle into muscles and bones and spirit. Many Romans would conclude their bathing with a plunge into the frigidarium, that shocking cold that closed the pores and sealed in the benefits of the thermal treatment. But this wasn't mandatory. Some preferred to cool down gradually, allowing their bodies to return to equilibrium naturally. The evening hours after the baths were often the most precious of the Roman day. Bodies relaxed and glowing, minds cleared by heat and steam, Romans would gather for the evening meal, the cena, which was as much social ritual as physical sustenance. These dinners were leisurely affairs, courses separated by conversation and entertainment, the whole meal lasting several hours. Guests would recline on couches, allowing their bodies to remain in the relaxed state achieved in the baths, while their minds engaged with poetry, music, philosophical discussion, and the gentle art of human connection. The Roman understanding was that this daily rhythm, morning work, afternoon bathing, evening socializing, created the optimal conditions for human flourishing. It provided structure without rigidity, productivity without stress, social interaction without artificial pressure. Now let us explore with slow and peaceful curiosity how the Roman Empire transformed relaxation from a luxury into a right, creating an economic system that prioritized human wellness alongside material prosperity. Breathe deeply. Let yourself settle even more comfortably. And if you find wisdom in these ancient practices, perhaps share this journey with someone who needs to understand the value of rest. The decision to make public bathing accessible to all Roman citizens was revolutionary, unprecedented in human history. Previously, elaborate bathing facilities had been the exclusive privilege of the wealthy, private amenities enjoyed by those who could afford to build and maintain them in their own homes. But the emperors of Rome made a different choice. They decided that certain pleasures, certain paths to health and happiness should transcend social class. The modest entrance fee, just a quadrans, the smallest denomination in Roman currency, meant that even the poorest free citizen could afford regular access to facilities that rivaled the private baths of kings. This democratization of luxury required enormous public investment. The baths of Caracalla, at their completion, had cost the equivalent of several billion modern dollars. The ongoing expenses, fuel for the hypocaust systems, salaries for hundreds of attendants, maintenance of marble surfaces and bronze fixtures, water delivery and waste removal represented a significant portion of the imperial budget. Yet the emperors continued to build, each trying to surpass his predecessors in the grandeur and scope of his thermal projects. This wasn't vanity or political competition, though those elements certainly played a role. It was a conscious investment in social stability and public health. The economic theory behind this investment was sophisticated. Romans understood that healthy, relaxed, socially connected citizens were more productive citizens, more loyal citizens, more likely to support the imperial system that provided them with such amenities. The baths were, in effect, social infrastructure, as important to the functioning of the empire as roads or aqueducts. The employment created by the bath complexes was substantial. Each major thermae required hundreds of workers, from the skilled architects and engineers who designed and maintained the hypocaust systems, to the attendants who provided personal services to bathers, to the slaves who tended the fires and cleaned the pools. These weren't just menial jobs. Many positions required considerable skill and training. The Fakari, the firekeepers who maintained the hypocaust systems, had to understand complex principles of thermodynamics and airflow. The Kapsari, the personal attendants, needed knowledge of anatomy, massage techniques, and the social skills to interact appropriately with citizens from all levels of society. The masseurs and masseuses who worked in the baths often commanded high fees, their services sought after by wealthy Romans who valued their expertise. Some became wealthy themselves, investing their earnings in other businesses, even purchasing their freedom if they had been slaves. The indirect economic effects were equally significant. The neighborhoods surrounding major bath complexes became commercial centers, filled with shops selling bathing supplies, restaurants catering to hungry bathers, businesses of all kinds that thrived on the steady flow of relaxed, sociable Romans who had time and inclination to spend money. The import trade in luxury goods was largely driven by demand from bathgoers. Exotic oils from distant provinces, rare minerals for bath additives, fine linens and bronze implements, decorative objects and artistic works to enhance the bathing environment, all of these created economic opportunities throughout the empire. The technology developed for the baths had applications far beyond bathing itself. Innovations in hypocaust heating were adapted for homes, public buildings, even military camps in northern climates. Advances in waterproofing and drainage found applications in harbor construction and agricultural projects. The architectural techniques developed for spanning large spaces with domes and vaults influenced building design throughout the Roman world. Perhaps most importantly, the baths created a culture of consumption that valued quality of life over mere accumulation of wealth. Romans were willing to pay for experiences, for services, for the intangible benefits of relaxation and social interaction. This created demand for a whole range of goods and services that might not have existed in a society focused solely on basic necessities. The Roman approach to economics included concepts that wouldn't be formally recognized by economic theory until the 20th century. The idea that leisure time has economic value, that public health is a legitimate area for government investment, that social cohesion produces measurable benefits that justify public expenditure. Modern economists studying the Roman Empire have concluded that the investment in public baths generated positive returns, not just in terms of immediate employment and commerce, but in long-term social stability, public health improvements, and the cultural innovations that emerged from the social mixing that the baths facilitated. The decline of the Roman Empire can be tracked in part by the gradual abandonment of the great thermal complexes. As public finances became strained by military expenses and administrative corruption, as social priorities shifted toward more immediate concerns, the baths fell into disrepair, their fires went cold, their pools cracked and empty. This wasn't just the loss of recreational facilities, it was the abandonment of a philosophy that valued human wellness as a public good, that understood the connection between individual health and social stability, that recognized leisure as necessary rather than frivolous. Let yourself drift deeper now into the mystical aspects of Roman bathing, where the physical act of cleansing became intertwined with spiritual purification, and the boundaries between sacred and secular dissolved like steam in warm air. In the gentle darkness behind your closed eyes, picture the moment when a Roman bather, perhaps a merchant from distant Gaul or a soldier on leave from frontier duty, steps into the caldarium for the first time. The heat envelops him like an embrace. The steam rises around him like incense, and he understands, perhaps without conscious thought, that he has entered sacred space. Allow these ancient rituals to wash over you, cleansing away the tensions of the day. And if you find holiness in this simple act of caring for the body, share this peace with someone who needs spiritual rest. The Romans inherited from earlier civilizations a deep understanding of water as a sacred element, a medium of transformation and renewal that connected the physical and spiritual worlds. But they developed this understanding in uniquely Roman directions, creating rituals that honored both the practical and mystical aspects of bathing. Many bath complexes included shrines or small temples, not separate from the bathing areas, but integrated into them, acknowledging that the act of cleansing was inherently religious. At the baths of Caracalla, niches in the walls held statues of healing deities. Asclepius with his sacred serpent, Hygeia with her cup and snake, figures that watched over bathers with protective benevolence. Before entering the waters, many Romans would pause at these shrines, offering brief prayers for health, for purification of both body and spirit, for protection from illness and misfortune. These weren't elaborate ceremonies, just quiet moments of acknowledgement that the bather was about to engage in something more significant than simple hygiene. The progression through the bathing sequence took on ritual significance. The initial cleansing with oil and strigil wasn't just practical, it was symbolic, the removal of not just physical dirt, but spiritual impurities, the casting off of the day's sins and errors, along with its sweat and grime. The movement from cold to warm to hot became a journey from one state of being to another, from the ordinary world of daily concerns to a transformed state of awareness where healing, both physical and spiritual, could occur. The frigidarium represented the shock of awakening, the tepidarium, the peaceful preparation for transformation, the caldarium, the intense heat of purification. Some Romans developed highly personal rituals around their bathing. They might recite specific prayers while applying oil, meditate on particular philosophical principles while soaking in the warm water, practice breathing exercises designed to align body and spirit while enduring the heat of the caldarium. The Romans understood, as many ancient cultures did, that the body was not separate from the soul, that physical purification could lead to spiritual insight, that caring for the flesh was a way of honoring the divine spark that dwelt within mortal form. This integration of sacred and secular extended to the healing aspects of bathing as well. At therapeutic springs like those at Bath, patients would make offerings not just for physical healing, but for spiritual guidance, for wisdom to understand the lessons that illness might be teaching, for strength to endure whatever healing process the gods might require. The curse tablets found at Bath reveal the extent to which Romans saw the healing waters as mediators between human and divine justice. People who felt wronged, who had been cheated or robbed or betrayed, would write their grievances on lead tablets and cast them into the sacred spring, trusting that the waters would carry their pleas to the gods and ensure that justice would be done. These tablets weren't expressions of simple vengeance. They were sophisticated theological documents that revealed Roman understanding of divine law and cosmic order. The person who stole a cloak wasn't just a thief. He was someone who had disrupted the harmony of the universe, and the healing waters would restore balance by ensuring appropriate consequences. The social mixing that occurred in the baths also took on sacred significance. Romans understood that the gods had created all human beings, regardless of their social status, and that in the democratic nakedness of the thermal pools, divine equality was made manifest. To treat another bather with disrespect, regardless of his worldly position, was to dishonor the gods themselves. This didn't eliminate social hierarchies. Romans remained acutely conscious of rank and status, but it created spaces where those hierarchies were temporarily suspended, where human worth was measured by different standards, where the rich man's fever was no different from the poor man's, where the slave's knowledge of massage techniques might be more valuable than the master's knowledge of law. The timing of bathing also acquired ritual significance. The afternoon hours, when the sun was highest and strongest, were seen as optimal for thermal therapy because they aligned human activity with cosmic rhythms. The sun's power enhanced the healing properties of heated water, just as night's coolness enhanced the restorative effects of rest. Some Romans planned their bathing to coincide with specific lunar phases, believing that the moon's influence on tides extended to the waters within human bodies, that certain treatments would be more effective when celestial conditions were favorable. Seasonal festivals often centered around communal bathing rituals. The calends of March, the beginning of the Roman New Year, might be celebrated with special purification ceremonies at the local thermae. The summer solstice might occasion community gatherings where entire neighborhoods would process together to the baths for collective renewal. Death and birth, the most sacred transitions of human existence, were both marked by ritual bathing. Newborn children would be bathed in specially blessed water, sometimes from sacred springs, as part of their introduction to both family and community. Bodies of the dead would be carefully washed and anointed before burial, prepared for their journey to the afterlife through the same cleansing rituals they had known in life. Even the architecture of the baths reflected this integration of sacred and secular. Domed ceilings weren't just engineering marvels. They were representations of the heavens, reminders that bathers were participants in cosmic order. Mosaics on floors and walls didn't just provide decoration. They told stories of divine intervention in human affairs, of healing miracles, of the rewards that awaited those who lived in harmony with divine will. The hippocaust fires that heated the baths weren't just mechanical necessities. They were representations of divine fire, the spark of life that animated all creation. The slaves who tended these fires weren't just workers. They were, in some sense, priests, maintaining the sacred flame that made transformation possible. Now, as you rest in deepening tranquility, let us explore the hidden world of Roman women's bathing culture, a realm where social restrictions loosened, where female wisdom flourished, and where women found spaces of freedom within the constraints of ancient society. Breathe slowly, letting these stories of ancient sisterhood comfort you, and if you find strength in these tales of women caring for women, share this gentle power with someone who needs it. The women's sections of Roman baths, or the entirely separate thermae reserved exclusively for women, were sanctuaries within sanctuaries, spaces where Roman women could escape the constant supervision that governed their public lives and explore aspects of their identity that were forbidden in mixed company. Here, in steamy rooms fragrant with rose oil and lavender, women of all social classes mingled with a freedom that would have been scandalous anywhere else in Roman society. Wealthy matrons, their status marked not by clothing, but by the quality of their bathing accessories, shared marble benches with freed women who had built successful businesses, with slaves whose specialized knowledge of beauty treatments gave them temporary authority over their mistresses. The conversations in these spaces were unlike anything that occurred in the male-dominated forums and basilicas of Roman public life. Women spoke openly about their bodies, about pregnancy and childbirth, about the intimate details of marriage, about their frustrations with the legal and social restrictions that limited their public roles. These discussions weren't mere gossip. They were forms of education that no formal school provided. Older women shared knowledge about herbal remedies for women's ailments, about techniques for managing difficult pregnancies, about strategies for navigating the complex social expectations that governed respectable behavior. Young women, especially those approaching marriage age, received informal instruction in the arts of seduction and pleasure, knowledge that was considered essential for maintaining successful relationships but could never be discussed in mixed company. This wasn't crude or degrading. It was sophisticated understanding of female sexuality as a source of power and joy. The rituals of women's bathing were more elaborate than those practiced by men, reflecting both the greater complexity of female beauty standards and the deeper significance that Roman culture attached to women's role as guardians of domestic harmony and spiritual purity. Women would arrive at the baths accompanied by female slaves who carried elaborate collections of cosmetics, oils, perfumes, and beauty tools. These weren't simple grooming supplies. They were the implements of an art form that Roman women had elevated to extraordinary sophistication. The process began with the careful removal of cosmetics from the previous day, a ritual cleansing that symbolically prepared the woman for rebirth. Milk and honey, symbols of fertility and sweetness, might be used to dissolve paint and powder, while gentle oils protected the skin from harsh scrubbing. Hair, which Roman women wore in elaborate styles that could take hours to arrange, required special attention. It would be carefully unpinned, brushed with ivory combs, treated with conditioning oils that had been infused with herbs chosen for their specific properties. Rosemary for strength and shine, chamomile for softness, henna for color enhancement or coverage of gray. The application of oils to the body was a ceremony in itself. Different oils for different parts of the body, chosen not just for their fragrance, but for their supposed effects on health and attractiveness. Olive oil from sacred groves for its purifying properties, almond oil for its softening effects, rare oils imported from distant provinces as symbols of wealth and sophistication. The strigil, that curved bronze scraper, required different techniques when used on women's skin. Gentler pressure, more attention to areas that male attendants might overlook, careful consideration of how to remove oil and impurities without disturbing the delicate balance of natural skin oils. Women's progression through the thermal sequence often followed different patterns than men's, with more time spent in moderate temperatures. Less emphasis on the shocking contrast of cold and hot, more attention to the gradual warming that prepared the skin for cosmetic treatments to come. In the caldarium, the hottest room, women might engage in sweating rituals that combined physical purification with spiritual preparation. Some believed that intense sweating could help regulate menstrual cycles, could purify the blood, could prepare the body for conception or help it recover from childbirth. The social hierarchies that governed women's lives in the outside world were both reinforced and challenged in the baths. Wealthy women were attended by multiple slaves, their superior status marked by the luxury of their bathing accessories and the deference shown them by attendants. But knowledge and skill could temporarily reverse these hierarchies. A slave woman who understood the arts of massage, who could diagnose skin conditions, who knew the secrets of mixing perfumes, might find herself in a position of authority over free women who lacked such expertise. These reversals were temporary and understood by all participants to be limited to the special world of the baths. But they provided glimpses of alternative social arrangements, moments when competence and wisdom mattered more than birth and wealth. The friendships formed in women's bathing spaces often lasted lifetimes and crossed social boundaries in ways that would have been impossible in other contexts. Women who met as strangers over shared beauty treatments might become confidants, advisors, even business partners in the enterprises that Roman women, despite legal restrictions, managed to establish and maintain. Marriage alliances were often arranged through connections made in the women's baths, not just formal negotiations between male relatives, but genuine partnerships based on personal compatibility discovered in intimate conversation. The women's thermal world provided a space where potential brides and mothers-in-law could evaluate each other as complete human beings rather than as economic assets. The medical knowledge shared in women's bathing spaces was often more sophisticated than what male physicians provided. Women understood their own bodies, had observed the effects of different treatments on themselves and their friends, had developed remedies and practices based on generations of careful observation and experimentation. Pregnancy, childbirth, and the care of infants were discussed with a practical wisdom that no medical text could provide. Women shared knowledge about herbs that could ease labor pains, about techniques for nursing difficult babies, about recognizing and treating the countless ailments that could affect women and children. Even topics that were considered taboo in formal medical discourse, miscarriage, infertility, sexual dysfunction, were discussed openly and practically in the safe space of the women's baths, with advice and support offered freely to those who needed it. The women's thermal world also provided space for intellectual pursuits that were discouraged in mixed company. Women might discuss literature, philosophy, even politics, with a freedom and depth that would have been considered inappropriate elsewhere. Some of Rome's most learned women, those who had managed to acquire education despite social obstacles, used the informal schools of the women's baths to share their knowledge with others, teaching poetry, discussing historical events, debating philosophical questions with an intellectual rigor that matched anything found in male symposiums. Now, as you rest in deepest comfort, let us explore the intellectual foundations of Roman bathing culture. The sophisticated philosophical framework that transformed simple physical pleasure into a path toward wisdom and virtue. Allow your mind to drift like steam rising from warm water as we discover how Roman thinkers elevated the care of the body into a form of spiritual practice. Breathe slowly, letting ancient wisdom settle into your thoughts. And if these ideas bring you peace, share this philosophical comfort with someone who needs intellectual rest. The Roman approach to bathing was grounded in philosophical traditions that viewed physical pleasure not as indulgence or weakness, but as a necessary component of the good life, a path toward understanding the proper relationship between body, mind, and spirit. This perspective had its roots in Greek philosophy, particularly in the teachings of Epicurus, who argued that pleasure, properly understood, was the highest good. But Epicurus didn't advocate for crude hedonism. He distinguished between different types of pleasure, arguing that the greatest happiness came from simple, natural pleasures that harmed no one and contributed to overall well-being. For Romans, bathing embodied this Epicurean ideal perfectly. It was pleasure, certainly, but pleasure of the most refined and beneficial sort. It harmed no one. It contributed to health. It promoted social harmony. It provided opportunities for intellectual discourse and moral reflection. The Stoic philosophers, who were extremely influential in Roman culture, initially seemed to oppose this emphasis on physical pleasure. Stoics taught that virtue was the only true good, that external circumstances, including physical comfort, should be matters of indifference to the wise person. But Roman Stoics like Seneca developed a more nuanced position. They argued that while physical pleasures shouldn't be pursued for their own sake, they weren't inherently evil either. What mattered was the attitude with which one approached them. Bathing could be virtuous if it was done in moderation, if it served health rather than vanity, if it provided opportunities for philosophical reflection and social service. Seneca himself was a regular visitor to the baths, and he wrote extensively about how thermal therapy could be integrated into a philosophical life. He argued that the experience of heat and cold, of moving between different physical states, could teach valuable lessons about adaptability, endurance, and the temporary nature of all physical conditions. The progression through the thermal sequence became, in Stoic thinking, a practical exercise in understanding the nature of pleasure and pain. The shock of the frigidarium taught that discomfort was temporary and manageable. The comfort of the tepidarium demonstrated that moderate pleasures could be enjoyed without attachment. The intensity of the caldarium showed that even extreme sensations could be endured with proper mental preparation. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations about using bathing as an opportunity for moral reflection. He observed how people of different social classes interacted in the baths, how physical vulnerability created opportunities for compassion and understanding, how the temporary nature of physical pleasure reminded him of the temporary nature of all earthly things. But Roman bathing philosophy went beyond individual moral development. It encompassed a vision of social organization that prioritized collective well-being over individual accumulation of wealth or power. The decision to make luxurious bathing facilities available to all citizens reflected a philosophical commitment to the idea that certain goods, certain opportunities for flourishing should be shared rather than hoarded. This wasn't socialism in any modern sense. Romans remained deeply committed to private property and individual achievement, but it represented a recognition that some aspects of the good life, health, relaxation, social connection, beauty, were too important to be left entirely to market forces or individual resources. The Roman concept of otium, leisure pursued as a path to wisdom, was central to bathing philosophy. Otium wasn't laziness or mere entertainment. It was the deliberate cultivation of activities that developed human potential in ways that work and duty alone could not provide. In the context of the baths, otium included physical relaxation, certainly, but also intellectual conversation, aesthetic appreciation, social interaction, and what we might now call mindfulness or meditation. Romans understood that human beings needed time and space to process their experiences, to develop their thoughts, to strengthen their relationships, to simply be present in their own bodies. The architectural grandeur of the great Thermae reflected this philosophical commitment to otium. These weren't functional buildings disguised with decorative elements. They were spaces designed from the ground up to promote the kinds of experiences that Romans believed were essential to human flourishing. The mosaics and frescoes weren't mere decoration. They were visual philosophy, reminders of the beauty and complexity of the world, invitations to contemplate the relationship between human creativity and natural order. The gardens weren't just pleasant spaces. They were living demonstrations of the harmony that could exist between human design and natural growth. Even the social mixing that occurred in the baths had philosophical significance. Romans believed, influenced by Stoic teachings about the universal brotherhood of rational beings, that exposure to people from different backgrounds and circumstances was morally educating. Wealth and poverty, youth and age, citizen and slave. These differences were temporary and superficial compared to the fundamental equality of all rational souls. The conversations that took place in the steamy, relaxed atmosphere of the baths often achieved a depth and honesty that was rare in more formal settings. Physical vulnerability, the absence of the status markers provided by clothing and accessories, the shared experience of pleasure and relaxation, all contributed to conditions where genuine human connection could flourish. Roman bathing philosophy also included sophisticated understanding of what we might now call preventive medicine or wellness culture. They recognized that maintaining health was easier and more pleasant than treating disease, that regular attention to the body's needs prevented more serious problems from developing. This perspective led to the integration of various healing arts within the bath complexes: massage, herbal treatments, dietary advice, exercise prescriptions, all delivered in settings that emphasized pleasure rather than medicine, prevention rather than cure, wellness rather than mere absence of disease. The Romans understood that healing, like learning, occurred best in environments that were comfortable, beautiful, and socially supportive. Their baths were designed to create conditions where the body's natural healing processes could operate most effectively, where the mind could relax sufficiently to allow integration of new experiences and insights. Perhaps most importantly, Roman bathing philosophy recognized the fundamental interconnectedness of individual and social well-being. Personal health contributed to social stability. Social harmony promoted individual flourishing. The pleasure of one person enhanced the pleasure of all who shared the experience. This wasn't mere theory. It was a practical understanding that shaped policy and investment decisions at the highest levels of government. Emperors who built magnificent public baths weren't just buying popularity. They were investing in a vision of civilization that valued human flourishing as the ultimate measure of success. Now, as our journey through the ancient world of Roman baths draws toward its peaceful close, let us reflect on what was lost when these magnificent institutions fell into ruin, and what echoes of their wisdom we can still hear in our modern world. Rest deeply now, breathing slowly, as we consider how these ancient practices might guide us toward better ways of caring for ourselves and each other. The decline of Roman bathing culture began gradually, almost imperceptibly, as the political and economic pressures that held the empire together started to weaken. The great thermae, which had required enormous resources to build and maintain, became increasingly difficult to justify as military expenses mounted and tax revenues declined. By the 4th century CE, many of the grandest bath complexes were operating only intermittently, their hippocaust fires cold for weeks at a time, their marble pools empty or filled with stagnant water. The specialized knowledge required to maintain these sophisticated systems, the skills of the focari and capsari and hydraulic engineers, began to disappear as masters died without training adequate apprentices. The rise of Christianity also played a role in the decline, though not in the simple way that some historians have suggested. Early Christian leaders didn't condemn bathing itself. They recognized its necessity for health and cleanliness, but they were deeply suspicious of the social aspects of bathing culture, the mixing of classes and genders, the emphasis on physical pleasure, the integration of pagan religious practices with daily hygiene. Some Christian moralists argued that the elaborate rituals of Roman bathing encouraged vanity and sensuality, that the time and resources devoted to thermal pleasure could be better spent on prayer and charitable works. The communal nakedness that Romans celebrated as democratic equality struck Christian sensibilities as immodest and potentially corrupting. But the real death blow to Roman bathing culture came with the collapse of the urban systems that had made it possible. The aqueducts that delivered millions of gallons of fresh water daily, the road networks that transported fuel and supplies, the administrative structures that coordinated maintenance and operations, the economic systems that supported such massive public works, all gradually disintegrated under the pressure of barbarian invasions, civil wars, and administrative incompetence. As cities shrank and trade networks collapsed, the great thermae became impossible to maintain. One by one, their fires went cold, their pools cracked and emptied. Their marble walls were stripped by scavengers seeking building materials for more urgent construction projects. The knowledge that had created these marvels of engineering and wellness didn't disappear overnight, but it gradually fragmented and dispersed. Some techniques survived in monasteries, where monks maintained simpler bathing facilities for health and cleanliness. Others were preserved in the Islamic world, where scholars translated Roman texts on hydraulic engineering and incorporated thermal therapy into their own medical practices. In the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Roman civilization, public baths continued to operate for several more centuries, though never with the grandeur and sophistication of the great imperial thermae. These later baths maintained some of the Roman understanding of thermal therapy, but they lacked the social inclusiveness and philosophical depth that had made the original Roman institutions so remarkable. The medieval period in Western Europe saw a dramatic retreat from Roman standards of public health and communal wellness. Bathing, when it occurred at all, became a private utilitarian activity, stripped of its social and therapeutic dimensions. The very idea that government should invest in public pleasure and wellness virtually disappeared, replaced by concepts of austerity and suspicion of physical comfort. Yet the memory of Roman baths never entirely vanished. Throughout the Middle Ages, travelers would encounter the ruins of great thermae, their broken arches and empty pools bearing witness to a lost civilization that had valued human comfort and social harmony in ways that medieval society could barely comprehend. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in Roman bathing culture, though more as an object of scholarly curiosity than practical revival. Humanist scholars translated Roman texts on thermal therapy. Architects studied the engineering principles of hypocaust systems. Physicians reconsidered the medical theories that had guided Roman spa treatments. The 18th and 19th centuries saw attempts to revive Roman bathing practices, particularly at natural hot springs throughout Europe. Spa towns like Bath, Carlsbad, and Vichy consciously modeled themselves on Roman precedents, creating elaborate facilities where the wealthy could experience something approximating the thermal pleasures of ancient Rome. But these modern spas, for all their luxury and sophistication, lacked the democratic spirit that had made Roman baths truly revolutionary. They were exclusive retreats for the privileged classes, not inclusive institutions that brought together people from all levels of society in shared experiences of pleasure and healing. The 20th century brought both greater understanding of Roman bathing culture and greater distance from its essential spirit. Archaeological excavations revealed the extraordinary sophistication of Roman engineering, while medical research confirmed many of the therapeutic benefits that Romans had claimed for thermal treatment. Modern spa culture, while often invoking Roman precedents, tends to focus on individual wellness rather than communal experience, on personal luxury rather than social equality, on temporary escape from daily life rather than integration of wellness into the rhythms of ordinary existence. Yet there are signs that modern society is beginning to rediscover some of the wisdom that Roman baths embodied. Public health initiatives recognize the importance of preventive care. Urban planners design spaces that promote social interaction. Wellness advocates argue for policies that prioritize quality of life over mere economic productivity. The Roman understanding that individual health and social harmony are interconnected, that beautiful environments promote both physical and psychological well-being, that access to relaxation and renewal should not depend entirely on individual wealth. These insights remain as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. Perhaps most importantly, the Roman baths remind us that human beings are not machines designed for maximum productivity, but complex creatures who need beauty, pleasure, social connection, and time for reflection and renewal. The Romans created institutions that honored these needs, that recognized them as legitimate claims on public resources and attention. In our modern world, where stress and isolation have reached epidemic proportions, where the pace of life often seems to accelerate beyond human capacity to adapt, the Roman model of institutionalized relaxation and communal wellness offers valuable lessons about how societies might be organized to promote human flourishing rather than merely economic growth. And now, as our peaceful journey through the marble halls and steamy chambers of ancient Rome draws to its close, let yourself rest completely, breathing slowly, feeling the warmth of ancient wisdom settling into your body like water from a healing spring. We have traveled together through 2,000 years, from the simple wooden bathing houses of early Rome to the magnificent thermae that crowned the empire's greatest cities, from the practical innovations of Roman engineers to the sophisticated philosophy that made physical pleasure a path to wisdom, from the daily rhythms of Roman life to the social revolutions that occurred in spaces thick with steam and soft with candlelight. Allow these images to fade gently now, like steam dissolving into warm air, carrying with them any tensions or worries that you no longer need to hold. What have we learned from these ancient masters of relaxation and renewal? Perhaps most importantly, that caring for our physical selves is not vanity, but wisdom. That the quality of our daily experiences matters as much as our grand achievements. That human beings flourish best when individual wellness is supported by beautiful, inclusive communities. The Romans understood something that our busy modern world sometimes forgets, that the body is not a machine to be pushed to maximum efficiency, but a temple to be honored with careful attention and gentle care. That rest is not the absence of activity, but the presence of peace. That true luxury lies not in expensive possessions, but in time, space, warmth, and the company of others who share our human journey. As you continue to rest here, in this moment between sleeping and waking, between the ancient world and your own, feel free to carry with you whatever wisdom serves you. Let go of whatever no longer serves. Allow the warmth of Roman understanding to soothe any places in your life that feel cold or tense or hurried. And if this gentle journey has brought you peace, if you found rest in these ancient practices, perhaps consider sharing this gift. Subscribe to join us on future travels through history's quiet moments. Leave a gentle comment about where you'd like to visit next. Share this with someone who needs to remember that they deserve rest, that they deserve care, that they deserve the kind of gentle attention that the Romans lavished on themselves and each other. The great thermae of Rome are ruins now, their fires cold, their pools empty, their marble walls scattered by centuries of wind and weather. But the wisdom they embodied lives on, in every moment when we choose rest over rushing, connection over isolation, beauty over mere function, healing over harm. In every warm bath we take, in every moment we pause to breathe deeply, in every act of caring for our physical selves or creating spaces where others can find peace, we honor the legacy of those ancient Romans who understood that civilization is measured not by its monuments of power, but by its commitment to human flourishing. Let yourself drift now toward whatever rest your body needs, carrying with you the warmth of Roman waters, the peace of marble halls, the wisdom of people who lived 2,000 years ago, but who understood truths about human nature that remain as fresh and healing as morning sunlight on still water. May you find, in your own daily rhythms, something of the Roman genius for balance, for pleasure that heals rather than harms, for community that includes rather than excludes, for time that serves human needs rather than demanding human service. And may you remember, whenever the pace of modern life feels too fast or too cold or too lonely, that you deserve warmth, you deserve rest, you deserve the kind of careful attention that those ancient bathers gave to themselves and each other in the steamy sanctuaries where healing was not just a physical process, but a spiritual art. Rest well, gentle traveler, knowing that you have touched something timeless, something that connects you to countless generations of human beings who have sought peace in warm water, wisdom in quiet moments, and healing in the simple recognition that we are all across the centuries beautifully, vulnerably, gloriously human. Sleep now, if sleep will come, or simply rest in the warmth of ancient understanding, breathing slowly, peacefully, carried by the gentle current of time itself toward whatever renewal awaits.